The focus of this PowerPoint, Fundamental Issues and Measurement, is on the types of decisions that we make as users of instruments, scales, or measures, or what have you. We make several decisions as a person each day, and we collect information from various sources to make those decisions. For example, as a parent or a primary caregiver, I may use the grades, homework missed, or standardized test scores that my child will provide to me from the schools to make a decision about my child's learning environment and habits. For example, if I'm noticing the grades for my child are lower than I believe they might be for my child, I might look into closely what is making up that grade. Missed homework assignments, exams. Well, if I'm seeing that most of the grades are lower than what I think they are due to missed homework assignments, I can make a decision to improve the learning environment for my child by helping them to set up goals for learning at home each day, helping them to check their calendar daily to make sure that they're on task, and also helping them to provide an environment that is quiet and efficient for them to complete their work. Ultimately, I'm using the grades or scores to make these decisions. As teachers, we use various assessments and scores to make decisions about how to better educate learners. As an instructor, I will use the quizzes or exams or projects that I administer to determine whether or not certain learning standards or concepts have been mastered. I can do this often through item analyses, which will identify problematic areas that either A, I did not teach well, or B, potentially areas that were maybe I thought I taught well, but the students didn't learn those concepts. But I can also learn from the assessments and scores about better ways to build better assessments to help measure my students' learning and make changes to my instructional practices. As principals of schools, we make decisions about school policies that we put in place and whether they are helping or hindering student learning. For instance, some schools have an open lunch policy allowing students to leave the campus. Well, some students may not return, and as a result will have a truancy. Well, if they have several truancies, it may be an indication that they're not wanting to learn. But maybe the school policy in place of having an open lunch is actually sort of pushing them down the route to skip school, versus maybe the policy should be changed that open lunches no longer occur, and ultimately can help improve the learning of the students at that entire school. Principals also have to make decisions about the scores that they generate for classroom teachers and students and how they report those to those that are higher up in the educational ladder. And school psychologists may use teacher, peer, and parent comment recommendations that are given to them to refer a student for specific testing about learning issues. It could be that a peer's friend, the parent, and the teacher are all talking and noticing that they're talking about a similar issue for a particular child or student in mind, and they're not sure if it's due to a hearing issue or an attention issue. They could bring this information to the attention of the school psychologist, who could then help to make a decision or take action on that information. Ultimately, we want to make sound decisions based on the information we collect, whether it be from peer feedback, teacher input, parent input, measures that we collect on students in the classroom or online. Typically, the more we think we know, the better we think our decisions are. Well, that's not necessarily true, because you can obviously throw in lots of information into any situation and think you have a lot, but maybe all that information is poor quality, poor input. So the quality of information is very important to helping inform the decisions that you make. The decisions you make are also dependent upon the appropriateness of the information. If I'm trying to make a decision about whether or not a child should progress on from one grade to the next, but some of the information that's included is based on information unrelated to that student's learning, that would be inappropriate information. It's also important that the user of that information have knowledge about how to use that information. Just because you can actually read a test score doesn't mean you know actually how to use it for its intended purposes or for its unintended purposes. This is why counselors, school psychologists, various test administrators are trained in how to actually administer and score and interpret tests. We make various decisions. Our decisions are made usually for the individual, or they can be made for groups of individuals. Ultimately, the role of measurement procedures is to produce or give us information that can be used correctly, accurately, to make informed decisions about how to help others, make decisions about themselves or for themselves. So for instance, the measurement instrument procedure could be an intelligence measure that we have administered to a child. Now the score is the information that's produced from that instrument. Now, how do we use that score? Do we use it to make a decision for the child? And is that decision that we make for the child appropriate? And now it's all going to be contingent upon whether that person that's trained for reading those test scores knows what it's supposed to be used for and not used for. The decisions we make vary from instructional decisions, curricular decisions, selection, placement, and personal. In the next series of slides, we're going to go over each of these by example. For example, we make instructional decisions. As an instructor, I have made a decision. Well, the types of decisions I made are based on questions such as, should I as an instructor review basics of data entry and SPSS for everyone in the class? Or do I assume that everybody knows little to nothing about data entry and SPSS? Maybe some students need more readings or examples on how to enter data into SPSS than others. So as you notice here, I can make decisions on the instruction that I provide for the group or on a case-by-case basis. We also make curricular decisions. For example, in the educational psychology program, we may make a decision to change how we teach intro statistics. Instead of making it face-to-face, we could also offer it online. Now, the question is, do students learn the same or more in the online version? We would not want to create an online course for statistics that would not produce the same results as a face-to-face classroom. A sound decision here is going to depend on showing evidence, not proving. You can never prove with empirical data, but showing that the online approach is as good as or better than the traditional face-to-face classroom approach. But the evidence that we get, the scores, generated from the outcomes, from the online approach, right? That decision we make is only as good as those scores that we get from the outcomes we use during collection to measure learning outcomes. So our decision is not something that's going to be cut and dry. There could be shades of gray. In essence, if the instruments we use to measure the learning outcomes were questionable, low quality, but we do see differences between the traditional approach and the online approach, we are not certain that the differences that we are seeing, that evidence in the scores differences, is due to the new curriculum differences, online versus face-to-face, or if it's related to noise, or as we're going to learn to call it, measurement error noise, due to the poor quality of the instrument that was used. So as you can see here, in a curricular setting, we want to develop and use sound instruments. And we're going to talk about this a lot more. Other types of decisions that we make are selection decisions. For example, which student should be admitted into a specific graduate program? As a professor, we review numerous pieces of information to make this decision, and it is not an easy decision. It is quite difficult at times. We consider standardized test scores, such as the GRE. We review letters of recommendation, undergraduates, maybe graduate GPA, letter of interest, writing sample or samples, personal interviews, if available. When we use all this information together, it adds to our decision, but it doesn't necessarily mean that we always have important information provided to us. Ultimately, this information is used to help us to make an informed decision about the likely success of any graduate applicant into our graduate program. So selection decisions are the types of decisions we make when collecting information. We also make placement or classification decisions. For example, a high school places middle school students into geometry based on their performance or test scores on an almost end-of-year advanced algebra placement test. If the students don't pass it, they go on the regular track. Another example, a graduate professor uses test scores, program of study, say educational psychology. Maybe it was mathematics. Maybe it was psychology. In previous math and statistics courses taken, and the grades they earned in those courses, to recommend or advise the most appropriate statistics course for incoming graduate students taken. Often, I'm asked this question, and I request this type of information to make a placement or classification decision. Oftentimes, meeting with a student to help them or allow them elaborate on the courses they've taken in statistics, and reviewing the syllabi and asking them questions almost at point blank can help to make more accurate or more informed decisions about placement into certain courses. We make personal decisions too. We make so many personal decisions, it's ridiculous, and it's hard to count them up. I often ask myself during the summer, maybe some of you do I want to get up early today, or do I want to enjoy sleeping in because I don't have to get in at a set early time? I have children. I have to drive them into school every morning. Do I want to wake up at the same time year-round, year-out, day in, day out? Or do I want to enjoy that time sleeping? Personally, I want to enjoy that time sleeping in. Based on my last comment, I sort of indicated a value. I value sleep. These are things that are hard to measure. Also, a lot of the tests that we have out there, GRE, ACT, SAT, so on and so forth, they're not measures of our values or our interests. Ultimately, we make decisions based on what we believe to be sound measurement tools. This doesn't mean that a sound measurement tool is without error. Everything is with error. We can just get more precise estimates, hopefully closer to the truth, but not always guaranteed accuracy. We can just reduce the error. At best, measurement procedures provide information on some of the relevant factors. That means we may be thinking we're measuring construct or attribute A, but it doesn't necessarily mean that we're measuring all of it. At best, we probably are capturing some of it. But regardless, the measurement procedures provide information on some of the relevant factors needed to make a decision, but are not the only piece of information that we will collect to make that decision. Here's a practical decision that we might make and then take action on. So for instance, Alex completes the GRE and applies to a specific graduate program in educational psychology. Information about the graduate program and Alex's test score and the subscale scores on the GRE can only give us an estimate of how well she will do in this program. The test score and information about the program cannot tell us anything about Alex's interests. All we know from the test score is where that person scored relative to everybody else, and then also the information about the program we can only read into the level of difficulty, the amount of work that it's going to take, how long the program takes. That information tells us nothing about the values or interests that Alex has, the desires, the aspirations in educational psychology. So based on all this information, if the person had high scores, moderate scores, high interest in educational psychology, maybe Alex would go on and pursue a graduate degree in educational psychology. But there are also values that we each have. Maybe Alex has had a passion the entire life for cooking and wants to open a restaurant instead. Here's a great example for myself. When I applied to graduate school, I played a lot of tennis as an undergraduate student. I considered going pro in tennis. I was not the best tennis player, but I was good enough that I could see myself playing some of the smaller professional circuit tournaments along with my doubles partner from college. I pondered the idea that even after I had gotten into graduate schools, had reasonable scores, strong interest in educational psychology, measurement, and statistics, but I almost tipped the scale on the side of my values to go seek out that dream, that passion, that value, that interest that was unrelated to my scores. So just because we have scores doesn't mean that it's going to make a decision for us. We, as humans, make the decisions ultimately. This example showcases that our values, our interests, play a strong role in our decisions, and that not all decisions are based on just a number or series of numbers. I love numbers, but numbers only can go so far. It's how you interpret them and use them that matters. In general, we make decisions based on evaluating the likelihood of certain outcomes, the pros and cons, or the advantages and disadvantages of these decisions that we might make. We make them every day, and value implications of certain outcomes. We also embark upon measurement for theoretical reasons beyond just practical reasons. I do this for a living where I help researchers answer theoretical questions. When measurement is used for theoretical reasons, an action is not necessarily needed, nor the focus, but just an understanding of the measurement procedures is sometimes enough. An example, do students who are more self-motivated learners perform better in an online measurement course than students who are less self-motivated learners? So as you can think about it, we have an outcome of performance, achievements in measurement, concepts and terms. We also have another measure, and that measure is the idea of self-motivation within an online learning environment. So we're going to probably need two instruments or questionnaires, or sometimes referred to as scales, that measure these two things: knowledge, or achievement if you want to call it, of the learning outcomes, and also another measure or instrument or scale or questionnaire that's going to consist of multiple questions or items about self-motivated learning. I'm going to get high scores and low scores. I'm going to need information to see if there is a relationship between my performance, or the student's performance in the course, and their self-motivated learning level. This is the decisions that we make that are theoretical. To this end, measurement involves assigning numeric values to represent the amount of attribute an individual possesses. This is not the only reason we embark on measurement or measurement procedures, but this is part of that process. We get a score, we make a decision, and then we act on the decision. Measurement is essential to all empirical research and decisions we make in the classroom, in life. To this end, quality measurement procedures will produce better data and thus better research or more informed decisions. I remember from my undergraduate and graduate days the phrase garbage in, garbage out. You can have the greatest question, or what you believe to be. You can have a great experimental study design, but if the measurement procedures you are using are of poor quality, then you have garbage in and garbage out. No measurement, no statistical procedure out there can save you. So as a result, you need to really strongly consider the tools that you use to collect information, whether it be about students, whether it be for research purposes, or just for theoretical purposes.